There is an instant, thin as a razor's edge, weightless as a held breath, when the world leans in and whispers, "Explain yourself." Most people obey, their mouths open before their minds have even finished computing the charge. Words tumble out like loose coins, clattering on the floor, already devalued by the very act of being offered. They believe explanation is currency. They do not yet see that the marketplace they have entered is counterfeit. In that instant, the accuser smiles, not because the explanation is persuasive, but because the need to give it has already conceded the point. You have stepped onto their map, accepted their borders, agreed to play by rules they wrote in disappearing ink. And once you are inside their frame, every sentence you utter only thickens the bars. But there is another response, one that feels like stepping backward into your own shadow. It is not defiance, not retreat, not even strategy in the conventional sense. It is a refusal to enter the arena at all. The moment the accusation is hurled, you become still, so still that the air around you seems to crystallize. It is the stillness of deep water before a storm, the silence of a cathedral at midnight. People notice it instinctively. The room's emotional barometer drops. They look for the expected flinch and find none. They listen for the expected apology and hear only the soft hum of their own discomfort. In that vacuum, the accuser's words echo back to him, stripped of the adrenaline that first propelled them. He hears how small they sound, how reedy, how soaked in need. And because you did not dignify them with a reply, the crowd does not ask, "Is it true?" They ask, "Why did he think it needed to be said?" The spotlight pivots 90 degrees. The hunter becomes the exhibit. The prey becomes the wall. The exhibit is pinned to. This is not theory. It is physics. Every action produces an equal and opposite reaction. But in the social sphere, the law is subtler. Every reaction produces a reframing of who holds power. When you defend, you validate the accuser's right to question you. When you remain composed, so composed that composure itself seems like an accusation, you invert the current. The energy they hurled at you ricochets, and because you are no longer in its path, it slices back toward its source. The blade is quiet, but it cuts all the same. Picture a long corridor paneled with mirrors. Each mirror represents a person observing the exchange. Normally, when you speak in your own defense, the mirrors tilt to reflect the accuser's narrative. They catch your gestures of protest and magnify them into signs of guilt. But when you stay silent, the mirrors have nothing new to reflect. They can only keep showing the accuser over and over from every angle. He begins to see the twitch in his own eye, the tremor in his own voice, the way his hand reaches for the moral high ground like a child grabbing for the last cookie. And because you are not moving, the mirrors begin to feel accusatory toward him. The crowd does not consciously decide to turn. It is simply that your stillness becomes the new center of gravity. Planets realign without knowing why. History is littered with examples that we misread because we focus on the noise instead of the quiet. When Marcus Aurelius was slandered in the Senate, he replied, if he replied at all, with a sentence so brief it felt like a shrug. If it is not true, it will fall of its own weight. If it is true, may I learn from it. Then he returned to his ledgers. The senators who had prepared entire afternoons of forensic theater found themselves holding scripts for a play that had been cancelled. The gossip did not vanish overnight, but it ceased to be interesting because the emperor had declined to make it a duel. In the vacuum, new rumors sprouted about the accusers, about their motives, about their sudden eagerness to cast stones from within glass cloisters. Within weeks, the story was no longer whether Marcus was tyrannical, it was whether certain aristocrats had grown bored and petty. The emperor never raised his voice. He simply refused to be the canvas on which others painted their anxieties. The same dynamic plays out in every boardroom, dinner table, group chat, and bedroom. Someone casts the bait. You always have to be the smartest in the room. The ordinary reflex is to list qualifications, to cite humility, to laugh self-deprecatingly, anything to dissolve the tension. But tension is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is a crucible. Hold the tension, and the impurities rise to the top. So you lean back, not in theatrical arrogance but in genuine curiosity about the silence you are creating. You let the sentence hang until it becomes absurd in its own right. 10 seconds feel like an hour. The accuser fills the gap with nervous elaboration. I mean, it's just that sometimes you correct small details and it can come off as well, you know. The more they talk, the smaller they become. The room hears not the original charge but the scrambling justification. You have not argued, you have allowed time to do the arguing for you. Time is the most ruthless cross-examiner, and it works pro bono. But why does this feel so unnatural, almost like holding your hand over an open flame? Because we are raised to believe that our words are our ambassadors, that if we do not send them out, the kingdom of our identity will be invaded. From childhood we are taught to say, "I didn't mean it. Let me explain. That's not fair." These phrases are emotional antibiotics dispensed for every scrape. Over time we develop an allergy to silence. It feels like neglecting a wound. Yet most wounds heal faster when exposed to air rather than bandaged in frantic apologies. The social wound is the same. The more you cover it with explanation, the more you invite infection, interpretation, misquotation, the slow seepage of doubt. Leave it open to the atmosphere of your calm presence, and it closes of its own accord. Still, calm is not the same as catatonia. There is a second layer to this art, subtler than silence, and twice as sharp, the quiet blade of precision. Imagine the same scenario, the same accusation, but this time you answer with a single sentence so perfectly honed that it slices the accusation off at the joint. Someone says, "You manipulate people." You reply, not hotly but reflectively, "Only those who can't be influenced say that." Then you stop. The sentence is not defensive, it is diagnostic. It turns the lens back on the speaker, and more importantly, on the listeners. Suddenly the room is not evaluating whether you are manipulative. It is evaluating whether the accuser is simply frustrated by your immunity to their influence. The dialogue ends there, because further elaboration would only blunt the edge. You have not defended, you have redefined. You have not denied the weapon. You have shown that it is a boomerang. These techniques, taken together, begin to create what might be called an aura, an invisible architecture around you that shapes how people approach you before you have done a thing. An aura is not charisma in the theatrical sense. It is the gravitational field of a quiet certainty. People feel it when they walk into your office and notice that the loudest voice in the room instinctively lowers. They feel it at a party when a drunk guest starts to mock your career and then, mid-sentence, trails off, suddenly sobered by the way you are looking through him rather than at him. They feel it online when a mob forms to cancel you and you post, hours later, a photograph of a book on medieval siege tactics with the caption, "Studying how walls outlast storms." Nothing else. The mob, deprived of oxygen, begins to fracture. Some members turn on each other, others slink away. A few quietly follow you because they sense you know something they don't. The wall has not spoken, yet it has survived the storm. Of course, the higher the stakes, the more refined the blade must be. In a relationship, for instance, the stakes are not reputation but intimacy. Your partner says, "I feel like you don't care anymore." The old script is to protest, to list every sacrifice, to enumerate the ways you have cared. But intimacy is not a courtroom. It is a dance floor. So you do not argue with the feeling, you acknowledge it without surrendering the frame. You might say, "I hear that's how it feels to you right now," and then you wait. The sentence is neither confirmation nor denial. It is a mirror. Your partner sees their own emotion reflected, but they also see that you are not rattled by it. Paradoxically, this makes the emotion safer to hold because it is no longer weaponized. The conversation that follows is no longer about whether you are guilty of not caring. It is about what caring looks like when two people are certain of each other's steadiness. You have not defended. You have deepened. In the corporate sphere, the same principle scales. A rival undermines your proposal in front of the board. I'm not sure this plan is fully baked. The room's eyes flick to you. Instead of leaping to your plan's defense, you ask, "What temperature do you usually bake at?" The line is delivered deadpan, almost curious. It does two things simultaneously. It exposes the metaphor as lazy, and it invites the rival to either double down with specifics, where they will likely flounder, or retreat into generality, which the room will hear as vagueness. Either way, the initiative has quietly returned to you. Later, when you present the revised numbers, no one remembers the initial jab. They remember that you handled it like someone who had already counted the cards. You have not fought for credibility. You have assumed it so completely that others adopted the assumption. There is, however, a caveat. The quiet blade must be kept clean. It is tempting, once you taste the power of silence and precision, to wield it as a cudgel, to become performatively enigmatic, to let the aura calcify into arrogance. That is the moment the blade turns in your hand. True quiet power is not coldness. It is warmth held in reserve. You are not withholding to punish. You are withholding because the situation does not yet deserve more than the minimum. The difference is subtle but palpable. Arrogance invites attack, whereas composed warmth invites curiosity. Curiosity is the soil in which reputation grows without your having to plant it. To maintain this balance requires an inner conversation most people never conduct. You must learn to separate your actions from your identity, to see accusations not as threats to who you are, but as weather patterns moving across the landscape of public opinion. Weather is not personal. It simply is. When you internalize this, silence stops feeling like vulnerability and begins to feel like shelter. You are not hiding from the storm. You are the mountain around which the storm must bend. The mountain does not argue with the wind. It simply outlasts it. Consider also the long game. Reputations are not built in moments. They are built in patterns. Each time you decline to defend yourself, the pattern gains another link. After a decade of such links, the chain becomes unbreakable. People stop asking whether you are guilty of any single accusation because they have never seen you scramble to refute one. Instead, they assume that if you are not responding, the accusation must be too trivial to warrant your time. Over years, this assumption ossifies into legend. The legend is not that you are perfect, it is that you are impervious. Imperfection acknowledged from a position of imperviousness reads as confidence. Perfection defended from a position of fragility reads as insecurity. One is mythic, the other is tragic. Digital spaces accelerate this dynamic exponentially. A tweet accuses you of hypocrisy. Within minutes, the thread metastasizes into hundreds of replies demanding clarification. The instinct is to craft the perfect thread. The nuanced apology, the clarifying screenshot. Resist. Post instead a single line, perhaps a quote from Marcus Aurelius, perhaps a photograph of fog rolling over water, and then log off. The vacuum created by your absence will be filled by spectators arguing among themselves. Some will defend you without your asking. Others will attack the attackers for being unhinged. Meanwhile, you are at the gym, or reading, or asleep. The platform's algorithm, starved of fresh engagement from you, begins to bury the controversy. When you return 24 hours later, the storm has moved on to fresher prey. You have not managed a crisis. You have outlived it. The archive will show that you never broke stride. That record is more persuasive than any single defense could ever be. Let us imagine a final scene, a dinner party where every guest has read the same self-help books, the same power blogs, and therefore believes they are experts at psychological jiu-jitsu. Into this room you walk, late, unhurried. You greet the host, accept a glass of water instead of wine, and sit. Conversation drifts to a recent controversy in your industry. Someone at the table, emboldened by the anonymity of the group, says, "Funny how you always end up at the center of these storms and come out spotless." Some would call that calculated. The table quiets. This is the moment. You could deploy any number of verbal weapons you have honed. Instead, you take a measured sip of water, set the glass down with the faintest clink, and say, "Storms are weather, I'm geography." Then you ask the person to your left about their children. The conversation moves on. Later, as coats are retrieved, someone will whisper that line to their partner in the car. By the next morning it will be in 3 group chats. In a week it will appear on an aspirational Instagram graphic. You have not defended, you have inscribed. The line is not yours anymore. It is public domain, attributed to you without citation. That is how legends propagate, not by argument, but by resonance. In the end, the refusal to defend is not a tactic, but a worldview. It is the quiet conviction that your life is not a series of trials, but a single continuous act of creation. Accusations, praise, misunderstandings, applause. These are merely footnotes to a manuscript you are still writing. Footnotes do not change the plot. They annotate it, and annotations are most powerful when they are brief, precise, and rare. So you cultivate the art of the quiet blade. You speak when speech will tilt the axis. You move when movement will redraw the map, and otherwise you remain still. Stillness is not absence. It is presence so concentrated that it repels interference the way a magnet repels dust. People feel it without being able to name it. They leave your orbit slightly altered, slightly more cautious, slightly more curious. They may never quote you, but they will quote the feeling of being near you. That is the final victory, when your silence becomes someone else's story, told in your absence, over and over, growing more luminous with each retelling. And so you wake each morning not wondering who might slight you, but how much lighter the world will feel today, because you refuse to carry the weight of every stray opinion. You dress, you drink your coffee, you read a paragraph of something ancient and durable. Your phone buzzes with notifications you will not check for hours. Let them wait. Time is your co-author now, and you have learned that the most powerful lines are the ones you allow the world to write for you after you have stepped away from the page.